Who's in the driver's seat of your life? Power or control? You can either see yourself as having control over many things, or you can see yourself as powerless and without any control. The important aspect that I'm going to discuss today is the difference between power and control, and which one we want to cultivate over the other. It seems as though we wish we could have control over everything. Well, that would be quite the life if that was the case. The truth is that there's so many things that are out of our control, such as the weather, behavior of others, politics, work environments. Those work environments combine both the politics and the behavior of others, making the workplace a huge source of stress for many people. But it doesn't have to be when we realize and embrace our own power. So, what are we in control of? Well, we're in control of our own actions, even though it seems like things outside of us hold us back from being able to do what we want to do. But what we do is actually always within our control. We get to choose. We get to make a choice, a decision that's based on the circumstances that are happening around us. And what influences our actions is our thoughts. Let's make it clear. Some of us are blessed or cursed with an inner monologue. Apparently, not everyone has this inner monologue. Either way, thoughts come up all the time, and we don't always have control over them. But once they've arisen, once they've arisen, now we can decide whether or not we allow those thoughts to rule or we let them slip into the past. Say, thank you for sharing. I'm not choosing that thought today. We have the power to change the thoughts that arise, or to view the thoughts in a way that is within our control. Real power is knowing the difference between what you can control and what you can't, and embracing that power instead of complaining or putting yourself in a victim role, which will land you in the back seat. Let's look at these things that we as humans complain about. As I mentioned before, the weather, other people's behavior, and politics. Yes, weather happens. Weather happens that ends lives and destroys communities, and we have no control over that. But as you'll hear me say over and over, is that we do have control over how we choose to respond to it. So, okay, we know we have the choice. Yeah, I have the choice for how I choose to respond, but how do we actually do that? How are we supposed to respond? Often we'll take ourselves through a few stages that are similar to the stages of grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she developed this model to describe how people with terminal illness, who would be facing their own death, published her own book on death and dying in 1969 that made these stages very popular. Anything you are grieving or experiencing a loss over will naturally go through these stages. And this is how we are internally responding to the things that are taking place in our life that we don't have any control over. And the first stage is denial. The second stage is anger, followed with some bargaining. Then there will be a period of depression and sadness until we finally reach that state of acceptance. So acceptance is where we are trying to land at. Let's first apply these stages to the issue of weather. Okay, so imagine it's your wedding day and you wake up and there's a huge rainstorm. At first, you might deny that this is happening. You might say, we're not supposed to be getting any rain today. This can't be happening. But after the rain keeps on and the forecast says it's going to get worse, now you're getting angry. Why me? Why today of all days? And then takes you into kind of a sadness or that depression stage. It's kind of like, feeling a loss of the day that I thought I was going to have, until you reach the acceptance of it all. How you get to the acceptance depends on your ability to direct your thoughts and your feelings in that direction towards the acceptance. So some of us can process things really quickly and get ourselves to acceptance in no time with some things. With other things, it can be more difficult. Everyone has the power within them to, try to try their best to prepare for the weather. So we roll with the punches. We don't want to complain about things that are not in our control. It's one of my little pet peeves when people want to ask me about the weather or how the weather is. I'm like, listen, I say there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad outfits and bad attitudes. So what about when it comes to the behavior in others? This one is much more difficult for us to get to acceptance on, unlike the weather. Some people have behaviors and addictions that are quite harmful, and we wish they would change. No one is responsible for how another person behaves, but somewhere along the line, some of us have been conditioned to believe otherwise. I've said it once and I'll say it again. We know how hard it is to change ourselves. Imagine how hard it would be to change someone else. Impossible. So in those cases, how do we respond to someone else's harmful or hurtful behavior? At first, we might deny it. We might overlook it. Give people the benefit of the doubt. See it as something, a one-off thing, out of character, and hope that it won't happen again. Okay, I'll pretend that I didn't see that or hear that or experience that. Maybe they lied to us. Maybe they drank too much and they got into a fight that we had to witness or hear about. Maybe they cheated. Maybe they made critical comments. Maybe they bullied us in some way. So depending on the severity, sometimes we can easily brush it off and dismiss it. But the next response is anger. Because if it continues, now we're kind of upset to see them behaving this way again. We're upset that they're showing this hurtful behavior again. This is where we sometimes go into that bargaining stage and say, hey, you don't stop this harmful thing, whether it's issues of alcoholism or other addictions, that's criticizing, being critical, being physically, mentally, sexually abusive, I'm going to leave you or break up with you or not be able to spend time with you anymore. I'm going to have to step back from this relationship we have. Meanwhile, you're going through your own stages of how you're responding to somebody's behavior. The other person is going through their own stages of how they're responding to their own behavior. They're going through their own stages of understanding what they are doing. They could be in denial of their behavior and of this problem. They don't see it as a problem. And once they do realize, then maybe that's when they go into the anger. They don't like it. They feel ashamed. They have this resentment that they can't stop it, and they might blame other people on it. Hey, they may go into their own bargaining of saying, well, if you just stop doing this, then I won't continue to do that. You're responsible for my behavior somehow. The anger and bargaining is still not very clear with what they are in control of and what they are responsible for. They might go into that depression next. They might feel down on themselves because they struggled to make this change. It's so hard. Yes, change is hard. Then the acceptance stage for them comes down to, do I change or do I just keep this way of life? And that is a radical acceptance for someone to accept a behavior that is harmful to others, which is not really acceptance. It is acceptance in a very off kind of way that they're not going to change. This is how I am. I don't want to change. I know it's harmful to you, but this is just how I'm going to be. And that happens with some people. And I know that this can happen to many people who have parents who succumb to, say, Alzheimer's or dementia. So you have to come to an acceptance, which can be a long road to reach, that this is how that person is going to be. They actually can't change that behavior within them. It is out of their control at that point. And now to realize the truth about where this person is right now in their life, and then looking at to what degree is their behavior or their change in their behavior also harmful to you. It could just be, here's an example that's a little less serious, but sometimes we make things big deals. It could be that your partner never wants to go anywhere and prefers to stay home all the time. Whereas you're a social butterfly, you're very adventurous. You like to go out and try new things. And you're always trying to get them to come out with you. And over, they let you down. Are they really letting you down, or are they just being themselves? And this is just how they are. And you're trying to change them and you have no control over that, but you keep forcing it. So the acceptance, again, both sides have to come to term with their own role in this dynamic, which is getting to acceptance. Can you accept that this is somebody who's a homebody? You've landed yourself in a relationship with somebody who's a homebody, and for years you've been hoping that one day they're going to change, but they don't. You haven't come to that acceptance yet. They have. They're like, this is how I am. You've known me the whole time. Nothing's changed. Okay, fine. I'll have to accept that I've landed myself in a relationship with someone who's a homebody while I'm a social butterfly. So it's not their responsibility to meet my social needs. It seems like I'm making it their responsibility. I'm trying to force that upon them. I'm trying to control them in that way. What are you going to do about it? You can't change them. So what are you going to do? What are you going to change within yourself so that you can accept this? Or do you not accept it? And then we know what happens there, right? So do you accept it or do you reject it? And when you reject it, does that mean that you also reject the person? No. You're just sort of rejecting their behavior. You're not accepting their behavior, especially that harmful behavior that we do need to step back from. Let's finish talking about politics. Let's finish off on that third one that I mentioned. Now, the political systems that we have in the world are all different, but the one thing that they all have in common is the need for power and control. We want to live in a world that has a sense of order, right? Instead of chaos. But what can we really control? Chaos happens even within the constructs of order. So we make laws to tell people how to behave because apparently some people don't know how. And then this makes criminals out of them. It's like at the staff meeting. Have you ever been at a staff meeting where your manager wants to raise an issue that is only an issue with one person in the office, but instead of speaking directly with them, we address everyone. These are often things that are common sense and don't need to be told to everyone. It's the same with our laws. The majority of people know how and want to behave in a way that allows for peace and order, while there are a minority of people who do not, for whatever reason. And when we exaggerate their behaviors and we focus overly on those people, the minority, it creates a sense of chaos in our world that we must fix. Are we trying to be perfectionists over here with everyone's behaviors? Instead of accepting that misbehavior happens, and some really terrible misbehavior happens for a lot of different reasons. And it will happen. It will continue to happen. We cannot stop it. We do not have control over other people's actions, despite the rules and laws that we impose on each and every one of us. But to make a choice about how much things are going to cost, rules for how old you have to be to get your driver's license, how many bags of garbage you're allowed to put to the curb every week, how much taxes you have to pay, and what we must give, giving credit to references that we cite, obeying speed limits, telling us that we can't live outside of our own countries for more than a specified period of time. You can see how all these things stem from fear. There's a fear. Uh-oh. If this happens, something bad's going to happen. So we got to put some rules. We got to control this from happening. These systems are put into place to control us, to have power over us, to tell us what to do so we can live a peaceful life. Because apparently there are people out there who will misbehave and we can't have that happening. So there must be a consequence so that we don't live in a world that's out of control. Now, I looked up the word politics, okay? And politics is defined as the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. And the way they typically achieve power is through control. Who has more control? Who has more power? The truth is that we all are self-governed bodies. We can join teams and work together as unified forces, but with what goal in mind? To control each other or to connect? Are we operating out of fear? Or are we operating from a place of genuine connection and an intention to learn about ourselves and others? And to have that acceptance that misbehavior will happen. And how are we going to learn from it instead of trying to protect ourselves and control other people? Whenever we're operating from a state of fear, we want to protect ourselves with our anger, and we want to control others through that bargaining. Some people learned about power all wrong by telling other people what to do. And when we told other people that they couldn't drink alcohol, they couldn't smoke tobacco, they couldn't do certain drugs, and we made those things illegal, we're still trying to control people from doing drugs. And we incarcerate people who do drugs. If someone harms another being while they're on drugs, that needs to be a behavior that we hold accountable, and we need to learn from them. They need support, not the jail. The jail is the fear. The jail is the environment that creates shame and guilt and unworthiness, while the support and the connection is the trust that leads to acceptance. So how are we choosing to respond to people's behavior? That is in our control. And that is where our power lies. We can misuse our power to control other people. Real power does not have control over other people's behaviors. We lost the ability to govern ourselves when someone thought it would be a good idea to come on over and set up rules for us, for people that they didn't even know or they didn't even understand. Now, to move into acceptance requires trust. Like I said, trust in ourselves, even when we can't rely on the behaviors and actions in others. Can we trust ourselves to act in our own best interest? Before we arrive there, we may first spend a little time in that sad and depressed state. We feel powerless without the anger that we had before, while some might stay in anger. Those protests that we see happening in political forums, that is the anger. The bargaining that happens, some people stay in that state of bargaining. Some people stay in denial. Some people stay in depression. Now, it's fine to visit these places, but in these places, we are actually powerless, and we continue to allow things to happen to us instead of for us to understand the importance of acceptance and the path that is going to get us to acceptance. The pathway lies in our thoughts, because someone who is truly powerful and who understands that acceptance is the way, and trust and faith is the way, and that compassion and connection are the way, their influence to others to also feel this power in acceptance, trust, faith, compassion, and connection. Please encourage others to aspire to their fullest potential and offer them opportunities to grow their mindset and abilities in this way. So when it comes to weather, other people's behavior, and politics, we have no control over these things. But the one thing we may have to learn the most is radical acceptance. Knowing that there are things we can change and things we cannot, and the power to know the difference.